The silence over the gray world of Drevna was absolute. 1,000 beings stood on its desolate surface, surrounding a matte black casket. No banners, no songs, no eulogies. They came from across the stars, not to speak, but to be present. A human funeral was never just mourning. It was remembrance. It was warning. The name etched on the casket, Yelena Volkov. To some, she was a ghost. To others, a nightmare. Among humans, she was simply called Baba Yaga. To the rest of the galaxy, she was legend dressed in blood and shadow. Few believed she existed. Fewer survived meeting her. The galaxy, in all its hubris, forgot what it meant when humans buried one of their own like this. They forgot why humans mourn in silence, why their most dangerous gather without a word. The Quorth Dominion had never fought a human war. They didn't understand. The Quorth were newly risen in the galactic order, arrogant and proud, with a fleet swollen from conquests of smaller civilizations. They interpreted the funeral of Yelena Volkov as a ceremonial weakness, an exposed event, a ripe moment to humiliate their most feared rivals. Intelligence reports showed humans congregating without their fleets. No planetary defenses activated. A gathering of relics and veterans. They sent a strike fleet. It arrived in silence, warping into high orbit above Drevna. 30 warships of gleaming core design fanned out like vultures above the desert planet. The commanding admiral issued a single transmission to his fleet. Execute. The sky erupted. Fusion lances and plasma torpedoes fell upon the surface like the wrath of angry gods. The mourners did not flee. They did not scream. Some were incinerated where they stood. Their silhouettes burned into the rocks. The casket vanished beneath the bombardment. The Quorth broadcast a message in every known language. Let this funeral mark the death of Earth's arrogance. From a human delegation, there was no reply, just one pulse of encrypted signal, the kind only Deathworlders could recognize. And then, deep beneath the sands of Drevna, ancient systems awoke. Across the galaxy, humans had always been feared not for their strength, but their memory. War centuries old still shaped their alliances. Slights were never forgotten. And Yelena Volkov had shaped those wars. She had toppled empires without leaving fingerprints. She had walked into alien strongholds and left no one breathing. No one understood the depth of her reach, not even Earth's high command. Some believed she had died decades earlier. Others insisted she simply vanished to escape vengeance. All anyone knew for certain was that she was the one sent when no other option existed, the last resort wrapped in skin. If she was gone now, it meant someone had accomplished the impossible, or she chose to leave. The Quorth had not just disrupted a funeral. They desecrated the passing of a phantom. Worse, they revealed themselves to the beings gathered on Drevna, not politicians, not generals, but old war ghosts, operatives who'd once served with her, soldiers who owed her their lives, enemies who had come to pay respect because they knew the alternative was worse. The pulse activated dormant protocols across the surface. Shield pylons rose from the ground. Structures that looked like ruins shifted into weaponized turrets. The desert began to tremble, and from below the sands, black ships surfaced, silent, stealth-bound vessels unlike anything in standard Earth fleet registries. They bore no insignia, no registration codes. Just one shared symbol, a single red line over a skull, the mark of the Widow's Wake Protocol. It wasn't an official military operation. It wasn't even sanctioned. This was legacy warfare. Humanity's old ghosts answering a call written into their bones. The protocol hadn't been activated in 200 years. The Quorth responded with confusion. Their sensors showed structures rising from nothing, power surges across non-existent networks. As they repositioned to fire again, one of the destroyers was cut in half by an unseen force. No projectile, no warning, just disintegration along its spine. They scrambled. Fleet formations shifted. Point defenses scanned for stealth craft. Their admirals demanded identification. All they received was a human voice, rough with age, speaking from an encrypted channel. You attacked during Baba Yaga's funeral. They didn't understand. They demanded to know who spoke. Another voice followed, colder, male. You'll understand soon. 3 more Chorus ships vanished. Their hulls crumpled inward, like something had crushed them from within. Others began firing blindly. Panic overtook discipline. The surviving mourners were no longer passive. Armor unfolded from beneath their clothing. Augmented limbs extended. Old war veterans reactivated implants long dormant. Among them were soldiers from Earth's forgotten conflicts, disavowed assassins, and post-human specialists created in bio-conflict labs. They didn't attack en masse. They vanished, one by one, into the sand and the sky. The Kortha's orbital scans showed nothing, and yet their ships began to fail. A frigate's AI core melted mid-calculation. A cruiser's captain decomposed in a sealed chamber, victim of a virus that didn't exist an hour earlier. Another vessel turned its weapons on its allies without crew input. At Korth High Command, back in their sector capital, they received garbled fragments of the assault. Visuals distorted, corrupted. No ship telemetry survived more than a few minutes. Their admirals ordered reinforcements. None arrived. All comms routes had been severed from unknown vectors. Back on Drevna, the storm calmed. Human vessels hovered above the surface. Not in formation, not for show. They circled like vultures who had already eaten. One Korth cruiser remained, its bridge locked down, its crew frantic. They begged for terms, pleaded for parley. A human appeared on their bridge. No warning, no detected entry. She was not Yelena, too young, but she wore eyes, and her voice was ice. You brought war to a grave. The Korth captain trembled. He tried to speak, but found no voice. The human stepped forward. We'd bury our dead with silence. But we remember. We always remember. She pulled nothing, used no weapon. The lights died. The bridge crew screamed. And in the outer hull, one word was burned into metal by unknown energy. Remember. The funeral ended, but the war had just begun. Drevna was no longer a graveyard. It was a signal. The moment the Korth desecrated Yelena Volkov's funeral, they declared war not just on Earth, but on something older, something buried beneath centuries of silence. The funeral had not been bait. It had been a threshold, one that had now been crossed. The High Command on Earth never issued an order. They didn't need to. The Widow's Wake Protocol was never part of the official military doctrine. It existed in shadow archives, whispered through backdoor neural links, and passed along through unregistered memory cores. It had no oversight. It had no limits. And once it began, it couldn't be stopped. Within 48 hours of the Drevna assault, Korth colonies in 3 star systems experienced complete blackout, not from kinetic strikes or fleet bombardments, but from infrastructural collapse. Their power grids disassembled themselves. Their planetary shields failed mid-cycle. Fabrication nodes began producing only rusted metal and poisoned food. Entire logistics hubs were sabotaged by insider actions, triggered by dormant code implanted decades earlier. None of this was possible, according to Korth intelligence. They had assumed humanity had grown complacent, content in their place within the galactic equilibrium. They had seen humans share trade routes, cultural archives, even genetic samples. They assumed cooperation had softened them, They never understood that humans cooperated out of strategy, not pacifism. And Yelena Volkov had once taught them the cost of misreading intent. The Korth attempted to rally allies. They reached out to the Venery, the Chaz 6, the Triune Accord. All replied with variation of the same message. We warned you not to wake the old blood. Yelena Volkov was not a general. She was not a president. She was an unranked operative with unknown clearance and impossible access. Her death was not just personal. It was historical. Every faction in the galaxy that remembered the last Death World incursion had sent a representative to her funeral, not from respect, but from fear. And now the Korth were alone. Their fleets retracted to defensive positions, but their own command infrastructure began to unravel. Trusted officers vanished. Tactical AIs suffered from recursive logic bombs. Entire armories were found emptied with no breach detected. Their own civilian populations panicked. On 17 colony worlds, riots broke out, triggered by psychological warfare techniques abandoned by humans 2 centuries ago. All reactivated. Humanity did not declare war. It simply removed itself from the equation. No messages, no terms, no threats, just absence. Their embassies closed. Their merchant vessels vanished from the charts. Their citizens off-world returned home. In diplomatic language, it was known as silent disengagement, but to the Korth, it was the final breath before the storm. On the Korth world of Alexis, their largest military production hub, over 1 million workers clocked in as usual. The planetary defense grid showed full operational readiness. Their orbital fleet cycled its patrols. But at 0300 planetary time, every screen, every datapad, and every implant-linked visual suddenly displayed a single image. A casket, black, simple, the same one from Drevna. Then a voice followed. Baba Yaga is not forgotten. Alexis ceased production that day. All attempts to purge the message failed. The image reappeared every time a device rebooted. It could not be overwritten. Their brightest cybernetic minds couldn't trace the source. Every time they tried, their systems locked and displayed another phrase. Legacy doesn't die, it waits. On the outer edges of Korra space, listening posts designed to detect stealth incursions began to report phantom signals. Echoes of ships that didn't exist. Thermal anomalies without physical presence. Magnetic pulses in dead zones. Every time they sent scouts to investigate, they found nothing. But each time, the same outcome. The scouts did not return. The Dominion Scientific Council demanded explanation, but none came. The human signatures defied pattern. Their vectors didn't align with known hyperspace routes. Their method of movement violated thermodynamic expectations. Eventually, the Council labeled it technological aberration, but the military called it what was old Earth Black Ops protocols resurfacing. And still, no humans came forward. No demands. No diplomacy. Instead, their nightmares returned. Korth veterans from earlier skirmishes began suffering flashbacks. One officer slit his own throat during a live broadcast, muttering that he'd seen her eyes again. Another attempted to detonate a reactor core before being neutralized. He screamed a name, Yelena, again and again. Reports of hallucinations swept through the ranks. Shadows moving in sealed rooms. Whispers in uninhabited corridors. Entire ships were quarantined when their crews reported simultaneous visions. This wasn't warfare. This was unraveling. The Korth finally decided to retaliate. They gathered their remaining fleets and launched an assault on the nearest known human outpost. Station Redhold, located on the edge of neutral space. It was unarmed, or so they thought. They never made it. 30 ships disappeared mid-jump. No wreckage. No survivors. All navigational data erased. The only record recovered from one ship's black box was a partial voice log. A whisper, "You shouldn't have come." Earth still said nothing. But throughout the known galaxy, others began to move. The Verikai Syndicate, a criminal empire with roots older than the Korath, issued an internal no-contact edict regarding all human affairs. The United Trade Spires of Alton, 9 severed contracts and closed their markets to Dominion agents. Even the Karavan Warbirds, mercenaries for hire, refused Korath credits, all citing the same reason: too dangerous. Within the Korath ranks, dissent spread. Entire divisions deserted, not to flee, but to disappear. High-ranking officials began purging records, deleting archives, and falsifying histories. The Dominion attempted internal control through information suppression, but it was too late. The story of Drevna spread, not as official report, but as legend, and legends have power. It was then that a new broadcast appeared, not from Earth, but from an unknown origin in deep space. The image was grainy, the audio degraded, but it was unmistakable. Yelena Volkov, alive, or at least someone wearing her face. "You sent fire to our silence," she said, "so we gave silence to your fire." The signal terminated. Was it a recording, a fabrication, or was Baba Yaga never truly gone? The Dominion collapsed into paranoia. Every planet increased its internal security. Martial law was declared, yet attacks continued, surgical, precise, impossible to trace. Infrastructure failed. Leaders died. No one saw the killers. No one heard the warnings. The humans had stopped speaking. Across neutral systems, old enemies of Earth quietly sent messages, not to threaten, but to make peace, to reaffirm treaties, to acknowledge debts long overdue. And none of those messages were answered. Earth had gone silent, not defeated, not wounded, waiting. The Koratha's final act of desperation was to send a fleet to Earth itself, a show of force, a plea for negotiation. They approached Sol with transponders active, weapons down, broadcasting apologies, explaining miscommunication, blaming rogue elements. They never breached the Kuiper Belt. Silence echoed across the galactic councils. The Korath were gone, not politically, not diplomatically, but existentially. No records, no lineage, no memory, save for what other species whispered in terrified tones. Their erasure was surgical, precise, merciless. The universe had never seen such a quiet annihilation, and still, Earth remained silent. Most assumed that silence was victory, that humanity had purged its wound and now rested, dormant once more. But those who had studied the old Terran conflicts, who understood Death World psychology, knew better. The silence was a perimeter, a boundary, and anything crossing it would not return. In the neutral system of Sindara Prime, diplomats met in secret, representatives from once hostile empires, desperate to avoid the same fate. Their languages clashed, their ideologies conflicted, but all agreed on one point. Earth could not be provoked again. A containment pact was proposed, then ratified. No interference, no surveillance, no ships near Sol, without unanimous council consent. It didn't matter. Earth didn't recognize the council anymore. The solar system transformed. Terraforming drones activated across Pluto and Charon, installing nothing visible to outsiders. Observers from nearby systems reported distortions, time dilation anomalies, sensor scrambling, data loss. No pattern emerged. Those who sent probes received only silence. No debris, no signal, nothing. Then came the first message in over a year. A beacon pulsed in deep space. Old Earth code, a language obsolete for 2 centuries. It simply read, "Judgment begins." The galaxy held its breath. Judgment did not come as war. It came as revelation. Hidden archives across dozens of worlds began decrypting themselves, messages, images, and recordings seeded long ago by unknown hands. All of them tied to Yelena Volkov, her missions, her battles, her impossible survival. She had walked through wars and come out unseen. She had brokered peace not through words, but by removing the warmongers before their speeches could begin. The galaxy learned that Baba Yaga was not a nickname. It was a code name, a title, passed from one to another across centuries, always female, always lethal, always forgotten when the job was done. Yelena had been the latest, but not the last, because the image in the final file wasn't her. It was someone new, a girl with scars across her face, and the same eyes. The realization rippled across intelligence networks. The Baba Yaga protocol wasn't about vengeance. It was about preservation. Humanity didn't eliminate threats for revenge. They eliminated threats to prevent recurrence. The Kords weren't punished for attacking Yelena. They were removed to protect the future. Fear became strategy. Several Outer Rim species voluntarily surrendered their weapons programs. Others offered access to trade routes and resources. The Galactic Accord restructured itself with Earth as a phantom seat, a silent presence that didn't vote, didn't speak, but could not be ignored. Even the warlike Garati began placing monuments on their homeworld, honoring the unknown Terran they once fought, a gesture of humility. And yet there was no reply. On the dark moon of Ephirion, a hidden observatory captured a fleet of ships moving past the edges of charted space. No insignias, no registry, only human design. Dozens of vessels, each older than the last war. They were moving toward the galactic edge, not to conquer, but to vanish. Earth wasn't expanding. It was withdrawing. Some theorized Earth was building something beyond space. Others believed they were sealing themselves in. A few believed they were creating a firewall, not to keep others out, but to keep something ancient inside. Rumors spread about the last war, a Terran civil conflict no one had ever documented. The implications terrified everyone. The Baba Yaga protocol continued. On 17 planets, known warlords vanished overnight. On 5 worlds, bioplagues targeting only engineered super soldiers were released, their origin untraceable. Black markets collapsed. Slave trades evaporated. Corporate war chains found their algorithms corrupted by poetic lines and extinct Earth dialects. Wherever chaos thrived, the shadows followed. Not with armies, not with bombs, but with precision. Every target removed, every outcome controlled. It wasn't justice. It wasn't morality. It was function. Humanity had become entropy with intent. Then the final archive opened. A transmission broadcast across every galactic relay. A single voice, synthetic, yet undeniably human. You were warned. You celebrated our slumber. You interpreted our silence as retreat. We are not gods. We are not monsters. We are consequence. The message terminated. No origin. No signal trace. But the voice had one unmistakable trait. It wasn't Yelena. It wasn't the new Baba Yaga. It was Earth itself. That moment changed everything. The galaxy no longer viewed humanity as a species. They were a process, a phenomenon, a natural force to be mitigated, not confronted. And so began the age of distance. Races withdrew from human contact. Terran records were scrubbed from accessible networks. Trade was conducted through intermediaries, never directly. Systems near Sol were declared quarantine zones. And still, every few years, someone broke protocol. A pirate crew attempted to raid a derelict human cruiser. They found it empty. When they returned to their ship, every crew member except the pilot was gone. The pilot was blind, muttering a nursery rhyme in Russian. A corporate entity tried to clone human soldiers using DNA harvested from old battlefields. The clones aged 20 years overnight and spoke in binary. They self-terminated. A research team tried to simulate the Baba Yaga protocol inside a predictive AI. The AI deleted itself. The server melted. The facility went offline. Nothing worked. Humanity wasn't technology. It wasn't biology. It was intent made manifest. And intent could not be faked. The last direct contact came from a young species, the Kirill. Naive, curious, untouched by past wars. They sent a delegation to Earth's orbit, hoping to open dialogue. No weapons, no demands, just questions. They received an answer, a data packet, compressed. Inside, a single line of text. You only knock on a crypt when you forget what's buried. The Kirill turned back. They understood. Centuries passed. Stories became myths. Myths became superstition. No species dared speak Earth's name aloud. No one visited the Sol system. Cartographers labeled the area void space. Superstitions warned against proximity. And then one day, the signal started again, faint at first. Patterns, rhythms, old Earth music, classical symphonies, jazz improvisations, tribal chants. No requests, no responses, just broadcasts. Humanity was not speaking to others. They were reminding themselves. Some say it was Earth awakening. Others say it was memory. One last echo. But everyone understood the funeral never ended, because Baba Yaga does not rest. She waits, and Earth remembers, forever.